Welcome to Representing an Indexical Archive of Silver City. My name is Alexandra Tager, Program Coordinator for the Department of Cultural Affairs. And I'm pleased to welcome you all to Western New Mexico University virtually. Before we begin this evening, we would like to acknowledge that we here in Silver City and Roswell are on the traditional lands of the Chiricahua, Warm Springs, and Mescalero Apache people. And we humbly offer our respects to Apache and all Native elders, both past and present. This series of workshops is the brainchild of Jennifer Douglas. Jennifer is an installation and social practice artist and assistant professor in painting and drawing at Western New Mexico University. Jennifer originally created the idea of Journey of the Storyteller Notion of Place workshop series because she saw an opportunity to connect regional artists with students during the isolation of COVID-19. Because these workshops are idea-based, she feels that art can be the stimulus for connective thinking throughout the university. And with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer Douglas.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that everyone is here, and thank you so much for supporting this incredible project. I have just been in awe this whole time during the entire process with the artists that we've selected this semester on just their ability to be able to connect with the students and these projects that are exactly what I imagined in the very beginning. The journey of the storyteller notion of place, when I first decided to do this, this is where I decided, to bring regional contemporary artists, to connect with students and faculty on a project that is specifically idea-based. These workshops correspond and are an extension of the hybrid learning in the painting and drawing program that I've been doing for the last 3 semesters. I really feel that our active exploratory minds lie at the heart of what we intuitively know and remember. Our place of origin, or where we choose to live, also defines us. By encouraging a deeper look at story and the notion of place, we can imagine how our individual experiences rooted in a particular locale inspire our narratives. The unique stories exhibited in these workshops encourage dialogue that can ultimately change our impressions of what is art and how this creative process affects and nurtures other disciplines in the development of ideas. It has the potential to bring students and faculty in diverse disciplines together. I really feel that the strongest contribution of these workshops have to offer is for the students at WNMU. The notion that art inspires the creation of innovative ideas through story and connection to place, addressed in these live presentations and subsequent public work, reflects the goal of the ALAS program, which is to enhance and strengthen students' thinking ability beyond what is expected. This workshop is
Jennifer, I think you muted.
Okay. So did I say this whole thing being muted?
No, that's fine. It was just like maybe the last 3 lines.
Oh, okay. I don't know why it did that. Okay, well, anyway, what I was trying to say is that to be able to open students' hearts and minds by example is one of the most important gifts we can give as educators. And I know that so many of the educators are here right now that are interested in this project, and that I hope that eventually in the future that all of us can work together. So I will now talk about Alia. Alia Ali is a Yemeni-Bosnian-US multimedia artist. Having traveled to 67 countries, lived in between 7, and grown up among 5 languages, her most comfortable mode of communication is through photography, video, and installation. Her travels had led her to process the world through interactive experiences and the belief that the damage of translation and interpretation of written language has disturbed particular communities, resulting in the threat of their exclusion rather than a means of understanding. Alia's work reflects on the politics of contested notions of linguistics, identity, borders, universality, colonization, mental and physical confinement, and the inherent dualism that exists in each of them. Alia Ali lives and works in Los Angeles and Marrakech and is currently in residence at the Roswell Artist in Residence Program in Roswell, New Mexico. So Alia, I leave it to you.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me? This is the nature of where we're at with Zoom. So I'm extremely grateful. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for the introduction, but also for bringing me to the university and to all of you for welcoming me. This is, I wish I could have come down to Silver City, but that's for the future. I did want to, first of all, also make some special thanks and some acknowledgements of people who aren't seen here. First of all, Alex, thank you so much for that introduction. Jennifer for organizing this. To Rachel Keller, who's my studio manager, who's assisted in all of the planning and preparation, and definitely to Sebastiano Marino, who has organized the website. There was a lot of preparation, about 3 months going into this, so thank you. I also want to particularly thank all the participants for making the time, bringing the enthusiasm, the curiosity, and the energy. Tonight we're here to celebrate you, and you are here to begin something larger with your community. So thinking about the archive, representation, the indexical capacities of place and home. How does one create an archive of place or of home? What does an archive include? We must also ask ourselves then, what does it exclude? What are we missing when we're confronted with objects in museums? Who is telling that story and who is being silenced? What are the dangers of an archive? Who sets the narrative of a place? And most importantly, how do we subvert that? Over the span of 1 week and 3 workshops, these participants who you will be introduced to this evening explored these questions around the archive. We critiqued them together and we also reimagined it. While one might think that the archive is about place, it is in fact about those living things in that place. I asked the participants to anchor their narratives in their own experiences. Their stories become the story of a place, of Silver City. These participants were asked to record a story of theirs. The conditions were very loose, and they truly embraced that freedom. Many of them wouldn't consider themselves artists, although this journey together proves otherwise. Their narratives were are actually interpretive, direct, multilingual, and can be accessed from multiple entry points. Participants were also asked to photograph objects themselves or experiences or represent experiences through photographs. This evening, we are celebrating the narratives and lived experiences of each of these individuals through these chosen objects. Jennifer and I will be introducing each participant, so this is how the evening will run. We'll be introducing each participant one by one. You will then have the opportunity to view their objects. But what makes tonight particularly special is that we will be hearing the narratives from each of the participants themselves. As this cannot be a live exhibition in person where we would normally celebrate and congratulate the participants after the event, we will instead have a 1-minute pause after each person's story. During this time, we ask all of you, and we encourage you to share your thoughts in the chat and celebrate them individually. After the presentations, we will launch a website, which if you love this evening, I'm sure you will, you'll be able to revisit the narratives and share them. A living archive, a mapping of objects and sculptures and photographs in which visitors can click on the object and listen to the story or memory or experience of a person. Visitors are encouraged to depend on the sound of the recording and embrace the notion of oral history making and storytelling, while being critical of those who create our narratives and archives. If you are from Silver City, you will also be able to submit your own, hence the living, evolving archive. So, without further ado, let's begin. Jennifer will be introducing our first participants.
Our first participant, make sure I'm not muted. Our first participant is Brooke Foreman. Brooke was originally from Cochise College, and she's pursuing a bachelor's degree in fine arts. Her goal is to learn as much as she can on art and come to a decision on how to express it from herself for people to enjoy. The objects that she's come to treasure and appreciate are trinkets that she's had for a really long time. They remind her of a simpler time in her life and of people she holds so very dear that helped her become the person she is today.
My object is a petite figurine of a pink mermaid laying on a coral reef in a shell with a small turtle at her side. My mother got me this figurine when I was around the age of 12 at a small figurine shop outside of Phoenix and Tucson in Arizona after a trip we went on with a friend of hers. Being a practical young girl, I adored fairy tales and magical creatures all my life, even to this day. She's made of crafted porcelain glass with a variety of textures, from the smoothness of her skin and shell to the coarse roughness of the sand and coral. Gorgeous pastel colors adorn her glorious figure with thin applications of shimmering glitter paint to her hair and tail. Sprinkles of glitter flakes decorated the coral reef and sand. She was something I could lovingly stare at for hours and would always be by my bedside during trips in between my parents. Appearing as a real mythical being frozen in time at the bottom of the sea, her hair floating in place to tie it all together. I would even take her with me to my grandmother's house in Northern California during the summer just so I could stare at her. During this time, I began to associate her with my grandmother due to the fact that that was one of the most fondest memories of the summer with her. She was caring and understanding. She came with us to play in the park and to visit other nearby relatives. However, only a few years after that was when she suffered a stroke. She survived, but she wasn't really the same after that. It was a difficult time for my father and his side of the family. We did continue to visit after that, but it was hard at first. It had taken some time before her body recovered, but she didn't really get to return home. She now lives in a resting home, her memories foggy and difficulty getting a firm grasp on everything. I suppose the reason for my association connecting her to my precious little mermaid was not just to the memories, but also to the personification of my grandmother's once kind and nurturing nature to that of the figurine's gentle appearance. I, however, had to part from her for a few years once my mother and us had to move during freshman year of high school. Once I lost my contact with her, those memories of my grandmother kind of took a back seat behind my head all throughout high school. During that time, it was only the memories of how she is now, slow to react, needing assistance wherever she went, almost cranky all the time, never really smiling, and only wanting to be involved with my daily life only through phone calls. But once I began college, I found her again, and I'll never forget how refreshing it was to lay my eyes on her beautiful figure again. Those soft pastels and shimmering glitter reawakened those long dormant memories. It was at that moment that things felt like the old sense of childlike whimsy and magic again. From then on, I began taking her with me wherever I went, and as of right now, she is proudly on my shelf here within my dorm room.
Thank you, Brooke. Now we encourage people to share their congratulations or any comments or thoughts in the chat for Brooke, please. Thank you. You can keep sending chats, by the way, so feel free to keep sending them. Our next participant is Dara Nathan Kingery. Dara has been an assistant professor of sociology in the Department of Social Sciences and Cultural Studies at WNMU since she started in fall 2019. And she teaches various subjects: education, food, social psychology. Her work as a doctoral student at the University of Nevada, Reno, and as a postdoctoral researcher at Vanderbilt University centered on expanding opportunities for participation in STEM, engineering specifically, for historically underrepresented groups. Currently, she's a co-principal investigator on a project in which she applies social psychology to understand the work experiences of engineers of color who have PhDs. She's also passionate about animal rights and the vegan movement, and spending time outside with her partner, Luke Kingery, who teaches composition in the humanities department, and their two dogs, Mouse and Mel.
People make the strangest connections in their minds, and when they weave stories together, and I am no different. The symbol I associate with my new home, Silver City, New Mexico, is the hot air balloon, just like the iconic hot air balloons located in Albuquerque, with that blue sky backdrop behind the rainbow colored hot air balloons of different shapes and sizes that look really close together, but probably aren't. They symbolized good weather, exploration, adventure, and leisure. Although the race is to navigate to a particular destination, getting there does not seem like the goal. As I was thinking about an object that connects me to this place and to New Mexico, I thought about what drew me here and the signs that seemed to point me this way. After I applied for my current position at Western, and before my colleague Andy invited me to do a Zoom interview, there were odd coincidences that felt like they didn't just co-occur. There were several, and they were so specific that I wondered, how could the universe not be trying to tell me something? So first, there was a New Mexico license plate that my partner Luke and I spotted in Reno, Nevada, visiting family. Then, while doing research before my interview, I saw that the date that WNMU was founded on is also my birthday, but 120 years ago, which is pretty weird. The hot air balloon appeared to me in the checkout line at Safeway. There was a reusable grocery bag that had a picture of hot air balloons on it. And although we were in Reno, where they have their own hot air balloon races, It said on the bag, "The Land of Enchantment." When I flew out of Nashville, Tennessee to get to Silver City for my interview, I arrived at the airport late due to traffic. It took longer than expected checking in and getting my boarding passes. And when I rounded the corner, as I was looking at my boarding pass, which showed that I should be boarding very soon, I also saw at least 100 people with all their carry-on luggage waiting to go through the separate security lines. So with no TSA agent available, I started at the end of the line asking every single person if I could go in front of them. They were all kind and they let me go in front of them, but I have never felt so uncomfortable in all my life. I'm not the most assertive person, and I also can't recall being in line and someone doing that to me. I felt like one of my introduction to sociology students engaged in the norm breaking experiment I usually have them do. Fortunately, I made it through security and made it here. So I almost didn't make it to Silver. After my visit, I was enamored with Silver City. I really liked everyone I met. And before I was offered the position, I had already convinced myself and my partner that this was it. It felt like the position description was written for me. It was such a good fit. I was excited to finally get to teach and make more of a direct impact, something I had to put on the back burner for several years while I was in a postdoctoral research position. The prospect was exciting because my family moved frequently when I was growing up, and I never really grew roots anywhere. The closest place to a home would be Reno, where I lived for 8 years and where my family lives, and where I met my husband. Interestingly, the high desert in Reno and here are at times indistinguishable in their beauty. We live near Dragonfly Trail and often marvel in awe at where we live. So, for some time now, I have been eager to settle down somewhere and grow roots, but also branches. I often think about the little moments that make up life, how everything can change in the blink of an eye, and everything that had to happen to get to now. I may not have a roadmap, but I'm grateful for the signs on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Dara. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Please feel free to share your comments, thoughts in the chat for Dara. Great. Feel free to keep sharing those chats. Jennifer, would you like to introduce the next participant?
I sure will. Jaden Arano was born and raised in Silver City, New Mexico. She is currently a student at Western New Mexico University, majoring in help me out, Alia. That word.
Kinesiology.
Right.
There we go. And rehabilitate. For some reason, I can never say that word. She enjoys helping others in any way that she can and believes in giving back. Some of her hobbies include spending time outdoors, listening to music while painting and drawing, and occasionally photography. She feels as though music and art are a different form of communication and can have diverse interpretations. They are also great for stress relief and a fun way to express thoughts, emotions, and ideas.
Pottery is a form of art that is familiar to New Mexicans. There's history of Native Americans living in New Mexico. Pieces of art, including pottery, were left behind by these people, and we continue to recreate their art today. Some of the first prehistoric Native Americans lived in Santa Rita, New Mexico, thousands of years ago, and these people were known as Mimbreños. This photo of a pottery piece was created by Mimbreños over 1,000 years ago. These semi-nomadic people engaged in farming and agriculture along the Mingres River and surrounding area. They were commonly known for creating unique pottery, which incorporated faces of people and animals. This piece of pottery was most likely used to carry water to their village to supply for their families. This piece was discovered by people who lived in this town before it became a ghost town. My great uncle was able to photograph this pottery and mail these photos to my nana. While some individuals might find this artifact or the town of Santa Rita to be interesting, I find the people of that town to be the most fascinating part. My nana and abuelo, my great-grandparents, were both from Santa Rita, New Mexico. This is the place they grew up and created their own story. They eventually moved to Baird, New Mexico, where they settled and started their own family. They had 3 daughters together, and they loved talking about Santa Rita. I lived with my nana after my abuelo passed away in 2016, and I would love to hear her talk about stories growing up there. We would sit at her table Saturday mornings, and she would tell me story after story over a cup of coffee and card games. She would call old friends just to talk about Santa Rita and the memories of growing up in that town. My nana inspired me. She was the most generous woman and gave whatever she had to whoever needed it. She made sure everyone was always fed and offered everyone who came through her door a cup of coffee. Her faith was incredible, and she passed down the same beliefs to her family. She taught me how to love, believe, and forgive. I hope to live with the same intentions as her, spread love and give back. She passed away last year in 2020, but she still lives in our hearts. I have plans for my future. I plan to move to Albuquerque, New Mexico to become a physical therapist. I want to travel and create memories of my own to pass down to my own family one day. I want to get out of my hometown and explore what the world has to offer, but I do not want to forget where I come from. I'm from a family who loves each other and helps one another. I'm from card games and coffee on Saturday and prayer and mass on Sunday. I am from my nana. This picture does not remind me of historical value. It reminds me of where I call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaden. Beautiful. Feel free to share your comments, thoughts in the chat. All right. Our next participant is Laurel Edwards. Laurel Edwards is currently a student at Western New Mexico University majoring in art. She has lived in Silver City, New Mexico for 20 years since her grandparents moved here when she was a year old. She's been raised by her grandparents basically her entire life. Laurel's mother had issues she had to deal with in her life that resulted in her grandparents being given guardianship of her. She's been interested in art from a young age, always intrigued by the freedom of expression and connection that art creates.
A sidewalk to nowhere inhabits my backyard. Dirty, brown, grassy, weedy, cracking more and more as time flies on. Reason for it? Who knows now? There's nothing to show why. It has become my mystery. To ponder, a place to go, to sit, or stand, and think about roads that end, or ones to carve myself. I find it my mystery sidewalk. A way to step away from the insane world. Many times I've gone alone out to where the concrete stops. Sometimes the wind blows and my thoughts float away. Thinking, reminiscing. I look all around at everything. My neighbors' houses, the trees in the yard, the brown grass and weeds. Standing or sitting there with nothing but the space around me, it feels free. Open, light. The wind will blow like it wants, and many a time it takes the weight from my shoulders. At the end of that sidewalk, looking out at my tiny part of the world, it's something that doesn't change, a constant in my life. Though little by little it breaks more and more as time wanders on. A sidewalk that leads nowhere may really lead somewhere after all. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you, Laurel. Please share your comments in the chat.
I'd like to introduce Mario Alvarez. Mario is a senior transfer student from Mexico, and he is here thanks to the Office of External Affairs at WNMU, where he is majoring in chemistry and minoring in cell and molecular biology, and he wishes to become a researcher. He is from a city in the state of Sinaloa, where known as the city where the palms touch the sky, or in Spanish, Donde las palmas tocan el cielo. His family history is the result of the Spanish conquest of Mexico, as well as the Christians' persecution in Lebanon and Syria, Palestine and Israel. A great-grandfather and a great-grandmother came from Lebanon, running away from insecurity, and the other side of his family, his great-grandfather and great-grandmother, were both Native American and Spanish descendants. He has only known a little bit about the Lebanese culture through food, spices, herbs, and some symbols like the green cedar from the Lebanese flag. His grandmother learned from her mother to make some typical food like kipes or tamales made with the leaves of the grapevines. She always told him anecdotes of her parents while preparing food like that. It is like it is connected to them, and he feels connected to his family through his food as well.
Toda mi vida he convivido con mis abuelos de ambas partes. Debido a que un par de abuelos viven en mi ciudad natal, tuve más contacto con ellos que con los otros. Desde niño he sido muy curioso y siempre estoy observando mis alrededores, y la comida es algo que me encanta percibir. Y desde pequeño he acompañado a mi mamá y abuela en la cocina, los olores, los sabores, las texturas, colores y vista de la comida me llama la atención. Y me he dado cuenta que normalmente cuando se está preparando un platillo que ha sido enseñado por sus padres, se tiende a platicar sobre ellos. Y con mi abuela no es la excepción. El preparar quipes en casa de mi abuela es todo un ritual. Se consigue la carne molida, se dejaba secar y molía el trigo, pero lo último es algo que ya no se hace. Se licúa la hierbabuena para después tener como un agua de hierbabuena que no se toma. Más bien se usa para las manos cuando se entra en contacto con la mezcla de carne y trigo. Se amasan los ingredientes, se prepara el relleno de las quipes y se hace la forma típica ovalada y puntiaguda de las quipes para ser rellenadas y al final cocinarlas. En este transcurso, mi abuela suele empezar a hablar de mis bisabuelos o del esfuerzo que se hace mezclando la carne y el trigo, o la vez que mi bisabuelo perdió sus lentes y puso su casa patas para arriba y a todos dentro de ellas buscándolos, cuarto por cuarto, y él hasta creyendo que se los habían escondido. Hasta que mi abuela ve bien a su papá y se da cuenta que los tiene en la cabeza. O la vez que un tío de mi papá se cayó en un pequeño puente que había en la casa de mi abuela que conectaba con un pasillo y el patio y como resultado un tío mío, hermano de mi papá, se carcajeó de lo sucedido o cuando mi abuela no se portaba bajo los estándares de mi bisabuelo, este le decía unas palabras en árabe, Chaitona de Jabrayate de Hebreyé, que hasta la fecha no sabemos qué significa. También nos platica de las veces que su papá la regañaba por sus calificaciones, aunque ella era buena alumna, el inglés no era lo suyo, y esto a mi bisabuelo no le preocupaba, sino le importaba el hecho de atrasarse con sus estudios. En otras ocasiones también nos cuenta cómo su papá agarraba las uvas del campo y las lavaba en el canal cerca de donde yo solía vivir. Las tardes haciendo quipes con mi abuela son una remembranza de sus papás y su familia. Al ella contarnos sobre eso, me hace sentir que ella ama a sus papás y que todavía siguen con ella. All my life, I have visited my grandparents from both sides. Because a couple of grandparents live in my hometown, I have more contact with them than with the others. Since I was a child, I have been very curious and I am always observing my surroundings, and food is something that I love to perceive. So, since I was little, I have been around the kitchen while my mother or grandmother are cooking, so I am able to be in touch with the smells, flavors, textures, colors, and looks of the food, so it draws my attention. And I have realized that usually when cooking a meal that has been taught by their parents, the cooker tends to talk about them, and my grandmother is no exception. Making kipes at my grandmother's house is a ritual. You get the ground meat, let the wheat dry, and then grind it. But the last thing is something that is no longer done. The peppermint is liquefied, and later we have like a peppermint water that is not drank. It's rather used for the hands when it comes into contact with the mixture of meat and wheat. Then the ingredients are kneaded. The filling of the quipes is prepared, and the typical pointed oval shapes of the quipes are made so it can be filled and cooked. During this process, my grandmother usually begins to talk about my great-grandparents or the effort mixing meat and wheat, or the time my great-grandfather lost his glasses and put his house upside down, and everyone inside it looking for them, room by room, and he even believed that somebody or my grandma has hidden them. Until my grandmother take a good look at her dad and realizes that the glasses are on his head. For the time my dad's uncle fell off a small bridge that was at my grandma's house that connected a corridor and the patio, and as a result, an uncle of mine, my father's brother, laughed at what happened. Or when my grandmother did not behave under the standards of my great grandfather, he said a few words in Arabic. Shaitana de Hebrayate de Hebrayé. that today we don't know, we don't know what they mean. He also tells us about the times her father scolded her for her grades. Although she was a good student, English was not her thing, and my great-grandfather was not concerned about this. But the fact of falling behind with her studies matters to him. On other occasions, she also tells us how her father would take the grapes from the field and wash them in the canal near where I used to live. The afternoons doing keepers with my grandmother are a remembrance of her parents and her family. When she talks, when she talks us, when she talks to us about them, it makes me feel that she loves them and that they are still with her. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mario. I love that we also have recipes, which is certainly a part of the archive. Please feel free to share your comments. And as you can see, archives are also multilingual. All right. Our next participant this evening is Mary Lean. Mary is a retired university professor who preached the gospel of poetry for 33 years. She's a textile artist focused on quilting, weaving, knitting, and beading. She grew up near Chicago and has lived in Cincinnati, New Orleans, San Diego, Portland, Oregon, and New Mexico. In her 50s, she started traveling with multiple trips to Paris and Poland and Italy and an extended stay in Morocco. A sense of place and concepts of home have shaped her identity. One of her passions is making a house a home, which she has done dozens of times in her adult life.
Beaming beaded bracelet. I'm a cup half full kind of girl. I see beauty around me, even when it might seem difficult to find. I don't have to search it out. It's flashing and rocking and singing around me all the time. Perhaps it's like the pinging of whale song. I ping off the beauty around me to find my place, to communicate who I am, to locate my loved ones. Therefore, home is not so much a fixed geographic location, but the whatever world around me, in which I bounce off and am reflected in the sparkle and glee of beauty. The beauty I breathe to survive is in the flax plants that become pale blue linen for log cabin quilt squares. It's in the silkworms that abracadabra their webs for brocade trim at the hem of a circle skirt. It's in the churro sheep that gift me with roving that is spun into warp yarn for my weaving loom. And somewhere in Prague, glass is fashioned into seed beads that glisten and gleam on the wrist of a Maori grandmother on a beach, around the neck of a Bombay princess in Paris, as a crown for a dying matriarch in Marrakesh, and tied on the hat brim of a sweet friend in Kentucky. My eyes steal glimpses of flickering beauty around me incessantly. My hands apply the beauty to something tangible, and I massage those pinging pieces of home into wearable ornaments that veil violence and danger, as they also heighten each guardian's magic and talent for endurance. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mary. Please share your comments.
I would like to now introduce Peggy Hutchinson. Peggy is a late in life artist, beginning long past the time she retired from full-time work. Most of her life was nomadic, first as the child of a military family, then into adulthood as she climbed the corporate ladder. In 2009, she moved to Silver City. Charmed immediately by the town and the Gila wilderness, she knew she was finally home. She started art classes in 2018 and is currently in her 3rd drawing class and 5th painting class. Her goal is to combine her passion for the wilderness with her desire to adequately represent it in her art. She describes her biggest challenge as moving away from perfectionism into the flow that creating art induces.
My father was in the Army, and in the 1960s, we were stationed at Sandia Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Our house at that time was the very last one on Manal Boulevard. Next to us was a long mesa that fed into the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. I spent hours on the weekends on the mesa and in the foothills collecting rocks, fascinated by them. Whenever we traveled in the state, I searched all of the roadside stands where we stopped, looking for specimens. Ultimately, we moved to Washington, D.C. when I was 10, and I had to leave my collection in New Mexico since my parents were unwilling to pay to move more than 700 pounds of rocks across the country. For the next many decades, I lived and worked in cities, only occasionally finding myself outside urban areas. I still stopped at roadside stands in rural areas to check out any specimens, and actually purchased rocks when I traveled to exotic locations like South Africa. Mostly, however, my interest was rarely piqued, since most of my time was spent on paved roads and concrete sidewalks. When I retired and moved to Silver City, I found interesting rocks everywhere and my passion reincarnated. The volcanic history of the area produced a myriad of minerals and conglomerates in a wide array of colors and a plethora of combinations. I even took a course at the university on rocks and minerals in hopes that I would have better means of identifying my finds besides shiny or holy. I hope to become knowledgeable enough to stop identifying every specimen as either quartz or granite. During that course, we were fortunate enough to get a tour of the actual mine and its debris at Freeport's Cobre site. They were generous enough to give us samples of native copper during that visit. Despite that course, I am no expert, but I still derive immense pleasure in rock hounding throughout the area. In past hikes, I have stumbled upon evidence of lava flow with all different sorts of rocks still trapped in the frozen lava just south of Jack's Peak. I found an obsidian cliff in Mule Creek and a quartz mountain off South Highway 90 by the Continental Divide Trail. I have found big crystal clusters and rocks full of holes where the air bubbles in the lava had exploded. I found pyrite in rocks at the Arasta site north of Pinos Altos, and what I believe to be native silver in some boulders I found in Gold Gulch. I have gathered crystals in the Mimbres Valley and found geodes on Bear Mountain. I have hiked creek beds from Silver City to Fort Baird, never taking my eyes off the ground. For me, all of these rocks, each the result of a different geological process, speak to centuries of existence unknown to me. All I see is the result. I find people to be exactly the same, subject to years of pressure and stress, worn down by time and circumstance. They present as who they are at that exact moment, yet reflect all of their experience in their being. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Peggy. Please feel free to share your comments and congratulations to Peggy in the chat. All right. Sidney Paul. Sidney is a senior at WNMU, majoring in zoology and minoring in art. Her focus in art is photography. She loves the concept of being able to capture a single moment in time and keep it forever. She's lived in 16 houses in 6 cities across 6 states. So the concept of home has always been difficult for her. She loves animals. She's loved animals since she was a child and plans to continue working with them after she graduates. She currently works at the university as animal keeper / biology tutor and at Rio Milagro Farms as a farm assistant.
When I moved here, it was my first time being on my own away from home. Well, I say home, but I really mean away from my parents. Home has always been a very difficult concept for me, I've moved around a lot. I've lived in 4 different states, 6 different cities, and 16 different homes or houses, I guess. And in that time, trying to figure out where I fit in and where I belong has always been really difficult for me. And it wasn't really until Silver that I started to process just what that meant to me. And, you know, I always envied people who grew up in the same house and lived there for their whole life. And because I thought that that's what home meant. But home is anywhere where you feel that you can be yourself. And in many of those places that I've been, I felt that. And so it's hard for me to have my heart in so many places and feel as if I feel home in all of those places when I can't be in all of them at once. And it was only really whenever I moved here that I started to understand that. And when I started to realize that was when I was in my element in the outdoors. The first time that I came to Silver, I was 16. I came up here with my mom and my cousin on a road trip. We drove the loop up towards PA and towards Lake Roberts and then back around through Membris. My papa lived in Santa Rita, which is a town that doesn't exist anymore, and also in Glenwood, breaking Mustangs. So we came up here to kind of see, you know, where he grew up and also, you know, where we came from. And on that drive, as we were coming back from past Lake Roberts, there's this area in North Membris where you're just driving through this tunnel of pine trees. And I could see the setting sunlight coming through those trees. And I felt this overwhelming peace wash over me. And then I remember in my senior year of high school, when I came out to tour Western to be a student here, I came with my mom. And after my tour, my mom and I went to Little Walnut Campground to have lunch and a picnic there. And I ended up taking my senior photos there as well. I took them myself. And again, we were surrounded by these massive pine trees. And it was then in that moment that I knew that I wanted to move here. And one of my favorite places to go, and especially to take people who aren't from here, is the Ben Lilly Memorial. Because once you're on top, you get this exceptional 360 view of the Gila National Forest. And you're just surrounded by all of these pine trees. And I came to realize that these pines that I was so attached to were ponderosa pines, which the Gila National Forest has one of the healthiest populations of ponderosa pines in the world. And it was among these pines that I felt this peace and this solidarity wash over me that I've never felt before. And so that's why I chose this pine branch to be my artifact, because it connects me to this place in a way that I'd never known before. And this is also why I got the ponderosa pine tattooed on my arm. And a lot of people have been asking me about the bottom part of this tattoo that goes down to my elbow, asking, why does that line continue? And so I actually designed this tattoo myself. And so the reason that that line continues is because even after I leave these places, you know, they're still with me. They're still a part of me. I'm still attached to them. They're still my homes. You know, I still feel like Indiana is my home where I lived for 8 years. I still feel like Denver is my home where I only lived for 3 months. I still feel like Idaho is my home where I only lived for 3 months. I still feel like Albuquerque is my home where I only lived 7 years. I still feel like Las Cruces is my home where I only lived for 3 years. And that's because I take those places with me and they eventually become me. I am a mosaic of all of the places that I have been. And so that line continues in my tattoo because my time in Silver will continue on with me wherever I go. And so that is also part of my artifact, the tattoo. But in reality, I am a part of this artifact. You know, it ties into me and who I am, because all of these places have built me and shaped me into the person that I am today. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sidney. Feel free to share your thoughts and celebrations with Sidney in the chat, please. Beautiful. Thank you so much for all of these comments. Please keep sharing them. For our next participant, I must say that when I initiated this workshop and when we were sharing ideas on how to develop it, one of the things were that the people who were in the room with the participants also had to share their stories. It was a space, it was an intimate space, sharing intimate experiences and knowledge. I personally shared mine at the beginning, but I chose not to include it, even though I've been invited by this new community to include my story. I felt like it would be inappropriate as I haven't been to Silver City. However, I will be possibly doing it if I continue to come down and visit, as I have a community there now. However, one of our organizers, the main organizer, is certainly a part of the community. And so our next participant is somebody who's also become a very dear friend, and is why we have collected here today, really. It's Jennifer. As an artist, Jennifer Douglas engages communities with collaborative projects that implement art in society and ecology. Working with historic adapted landrace species, she examines what it means to protect interdependence of biodiversity, conservation, and cultural survival in Southwest pastoralist cultures. Recently, she has had to confront the challenges and devastation that climate change is creating. As drought becomes a more central element of contemporary pastoralist existence, the status and the identity of those who live inside their place of cultural origin, like the desert cultures she works with, increasingly become defined by the environmental conditions that make it difficult to keep their traditional heritage intact. Jennifer hopes through her social practice, she can create a new and much more effective paradigm for conservation.
Every morning, I wake up right before the first rays of dawn. Our bed is on the east side of the house with my head next to a big window. I wake up and open my eyes and look out the window every morning to the most beautiful sunrise. I watch it as the first rays of light enter the horizon, the huge expanse of clear blue sky that melts into bright orange and red right at the horizon line. I see the sunrise from our farm over a clear expanse of 100 miles of desert to the Sierra Madre range in Mexico. At this moment, before I get ready for the day, it is clear and completely still, as if the world is holding its breath, waiting for the day to come. The entire distance is without any houses or man-made structures. It has the feeling of intense solitude, the place where I like to be, quiet, without much distraction, protected only in my thoughts. As the light crept farther up, the silhouette of the trees, especially grandmother juniper outside our window, came into being. Her branches were completely still and quiet. She is a wonderful presence outside my window. My girls and I have talked about her a lot. I have sat and watched her many times in the middle of the night, wondering what she has seen and felt in the many centuries that she has been alive. When my daughters were young, they named this ancient juniper tree Grandmother Juniper. It is one of those old beings, close to a millennium or so. She is big and gnarled with strong branches and alligator skin bark. When you put your nose up to her branches, you get the timelessness of her scent. It smells like clear air, perfect, like the smell of creosote in the desert monsoon rain. This was Ella and Raven's friend growing up. They named her Alligator Juniper because at 3 and 4 years old, who else can she be but Grandmother Juniper? She is old and wise and is an alligator juniper tree. When the girls were young, we would sit in her branches and talk about her as if she were part of the family and guess on her experiences. They marveled at her branches, and the older they got, the higher they were able to climb. Grandmother Juniper became the friend to most of Raven and Ella's friends, and they too would talk to her as if she was an old friend. She was the comfort for them when they were sad, and that is where I knew I could find them, when they needed to be alone, in the folds of her branches. So here she is in the early morning light, always being a sentinel, seeing life come and go around her. I was worried about her in the last few years in the terrible droughts, seeing many trees her age suffering in the dry and dying. But she is hanging on, still green and healthy, alive with her roots in the ground. I wonder if she knows Ella is not here to climb her branches. I wonder if she knows Ella died tragically. I wonder if Ella came to her in her death and whispered in her branches that she no longer exists. I wonder if she knows time changes. Our lives are a minuscule of hers. But dawn is our favorite time of day, and this is what we shared together. Our best memory was waking up for a horse show. We would get up about 5 a.m., an hour before light. We would gather our show clothes and hot drinks and head out to the barn. I would not have to drag Ella out of bed, but sometimes, most of the time, she would wake me up first, excited for the day. There's something wonderful about being with the horses in the early morning, their excitement of having us there at a time that is just theirs, when we are generally asleep in our beds. We would gather our tack and things for the day and load up in the first rays of light. We would drive to our destination, hauling the horses. We would comment on the stillness and quietness early in the morning. There is no traffic. People are asleep in their beds. The world is fresh and clean and ready for another day. We would then ponder the thought of what happens when the first light hits the atmosphere as it forever goes around the earth. These many blessings through the ages given to the earth and its beings at some point on earth, every moment of the day since the beginning of time. I could always see the amazement on Ella's face as we talked. She was so pure of thought, and I knew she comprehended deeper than myself. Then we would say our blessing for being alive at this moment and experiencing such beauty. She loved the mirages the first light would make as we drove down the highway. The light and refraction would distort the distant mountains into weird shapes. We would comment on the fact that this is where the crack in the earth lies between two worlds. It was always fun to talk like this because it would open up many possibilities to the miracle of being alive. This piece of old gnarled juniper tree was found by Ella. When she found it, she immediately announced it was created by the fairies in the image of fire. Somehow it exuded magical powers. The tree where it came from was similar to Grandmother Juniper, ancient and gnarled, a sentinel of time past. I wonder somehow if Grandmother Juniper records our life here. I wonder if she is happy to see and know she will always be loved by us. I wonder if she holds our memories. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Please feel free to share your comments and thoughts. Please keep sharing your thoughts. Thank you again for participating and continuing in the chat. Our next participant is Abigail Ege Ogas. She was born and raised in Grant County, New Mexico. She's currently beginning her studio work, painting art in classes at Western New Mexico University. One of Abby's goals is to bring happiness to people through her artwork. Art is her everyday. Her connecting objects to this area are the murals she has been fortunate enough to work on. She's been part of a group restoring and creating murals in Grant County, New Mexico since she was 14. She has always loved the murals in the area, and when she was younger, she was hoping to get a chance to work on one in particular, the Salt of the Earth mural in Bayard, New Mexico. Now that she's gotten the opportunity to do that, she definitely feels a stronger connection to the area.
Also called nesting dolls. My father bought this doll for my mother in the early 2000s on a trip to Belarus. She made a local street artisan. She has carved out a decorated with
I just want to make sure is there a block?
She's been having trouble with her internet all evening, so this is probably the problem.
Okay, wonderful. I just want to make sure because I don't want your story to get cut off. So I wanted to make sure that, would you like to try it again, Abigail? Or if the internet is too difficult, we can maybe try it later on from the website.
Can you hear me?
I think so. Do you want to try it again?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, that sounds a lot better. All right. Let's take a moment and go ahead and try it again. Thank you, Alexandra.
My object I want to tell a story about is my mother's Matryoshka doll. These are also called nesting dolls. My father bought this doll for my mother in the early It's made in Belarus by a local street artisan. I have been admiring and playing with this doll since I was a tiny. She is carved out of wood and richly decorated with glitter and lac. She is beautiful on her, but inside she contains something very special. Her 4 daughters, each girl shares similar characteristics with her mother, but also some of their own individual designs. Something I have always loved to do is to take the dolls and play with them. One of the characteristics of dolls is wood makes a loud squeakiness. This was slightly irritating my mother if I was playing with them for also occasionally I was appealing to me with I love the small birds and very they have pretty pink cheeks. That reminds me of how
Abigail?
my cheek would.
Abigail, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, so we're going to try something different. If everyone can be patient, I'm going to step out of here. Excuse me. Abigail, we're gonna hold Abigail's story until later, and when we launch the website, with all of us here, actually Abigail has recorded her story. So it would be a perfect occasion to hear it from there. Now, Abigail and all of the participants have actually written the transcript of what they've recorded, but I don't feel it's appropriate to tell Abigail's story through my voice. I think it should come through her voice, but this is also now the nature of the internet, and actually Abigail's traveling. So thank you, Abigail, for even being here. And I know that this is where we're at. So hang tight, stay tuned. More Abigail later. Thank you. Abigail, is that okay?
I didn't really hear you, so I don't know what you said.
Okay. Okay, I'll send you a message. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll text her. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I'll go ahead and introduce Yen.
Yes, perfect. Excuse me. Please.
Yen Chu was born in Taichung, Taiwan. Her family moved to the States when she was very young, and she learned to speak Mandarin Chinese at home. Growing up, she was not allowed to speak to her parents in English, while the outside world seemed to only speak it. Stepping in between worlds on a daily basis, she became fascinated by the methods with which people connect to each other. Communication, though an instinctual need, requires skills and cultivation. Now pursuing a BFA in ceramics alongside a minor in literature, she seeks to understand the networks that connect people through the creation of art.
So, on my first day of school, I didn't understand a word anyone said. I was raised in a Taiwanese home, and as an immigrant, my identity is not geographically linked to the US in the same way that many others will take for granted. Even American influences have removed me from the culture that my parents grew up in. But this following recording, simultaneously intimate as you eat with my family, yet out of reach by language barrier, may feel inaccessible for many. However, by listening, you are inadvertently a part of my community, whether we are aware of each other or not. Living in Silver City, I have discovered a network deeper than we are as individuals. This is a study of, as well as an invitation to this social gestalt.
为什么不继续做啊？只要不跟那个人说就好。
好像我忘记了，我妈妈有跟我讲起来，到底那时候发生什么事情。
带小孩可能好像是更辛苦了吧？
带小孩辛苦没办法，我想他后来还是多少有做一些啦，但是因为没有跟工厂的那个connection，大概就不太容易。
妈是从阿嬷学到之后要怎么做一些东西嘛，像风。
事实上，我妈妈教我们东西非常的少。我妈妈非常的注重 education。我觉得是因为她很聪明，她很想要念书，但是在台湾，女生念书不是很重要，他们让男生去念书。那我妈妈她是属于那种，是照顾家里所有的人，所以他们不给她什么念书的机会，觉得女生以后结婚就要嫁出去是浪费钱，任何的 investment 对女生来说都不值得。所以我妈妈，他们没有给我妈妈很多的机会，她甚至要去学做这个裁缝，需要去 bake 我的那个 grandpa， 我的外公，然后 后他们还不想要，他们觉得说浪费钱，然后好像是一个 relative 讲说，哎呀，你就让他去学吧，他那么聪明，他有那个 skill， 他以后会赚好多钱，那么好。然后外婆一想就说好吧，但是还是后来还是一直念说啊浪费钱浪费钱。不过我妈妈是学的。
是怎么学到说啊可以缝衣服，然后你那时候有做给我一个小娃娃。
其实我都是看我妈妈在做东西，她不太会教我做东西，因为她会觉得说念书比较重要。然后，我还记得小时候，国中的时候吧，学校有一个功课就是教我们做一个玩具娃娃，一个 stuffed animal。我做乱七八糟，我妈看着受不了，她把它拿去做，做一个 stuffed animal 去教。因为我没有办法，我妈妈看我做的东西都觉得哎呀你不会啦，但是我后来才发现，我就这样光是这样看她做，后来我的一些那种有一些基本的概念，就是从 observation 来的，还是有帮助。我当然想，可能也遗传到我妈妈的一些 skills。
我们家庭的人，但是都是走 science 的路，可是我觉得我们也就是大家都artistic。爸爸喜欢音乐，然后也喜欢画画，然后 watercolor。对。然后妈妈也会做东西。
我们家里每个人都有一点点。
我觉得我比较是属于那种 practical 的 sense。用在，我好像不是真的 artistic， 是非常的 practical。
妈妈画图其实很好看。
我觉得浪费时间。
就是老实讲，我完全没有看过像芊芊她那种 style。她是非常unique，非常非常独特的。
你们会不会觉得说我们搬到这边也让我们有不知道是不是机会，或者是比较多的时间，我们大家都开始比较会做一些 art 的东西。我知道我自己是坐在这边开始上学，然后就开始弄 art 的东西越来越多了。
那我想是我们的 stage， 我们的 life stage， 因为我们终于小孩子长大了，不是说只是一直在专心工作，我们现在终于慢慢的可以，像我现在可以去拿一些 play 的 class 啊什么的。我不知道以前我会不会有空，没有时间去想。
我倒是没有，我以前的兴趣，现在只剩下篮球。对啊，以前弹钢琴我可以弹一整个下午，一首歌而已。画图我可以画也好一整个下午，完全没有那个兴。
好像是有兴趣也不一定意思说像那么多的。
那没错，但是我现在连碰都没有在碰。
你觉得会不会跟钢琴不是你想要的钢琴有关？如果我们
也许有一点，对啊，也许有一点。
就他说，现在是 computer engineer，可是他说他如果担心钱会想要弄音乐，你们有没有这样子的？
我会非常非常想要当那个 choir 的 director。
音乐，唱歌。为什么？
我觉得第一个音乐非常喜欢的，对不对？那第二个，我觉得我也有一点那个天分。
爸爸去那个这边的高中去加法。
我需要我喜欢的音乐，我不喜欢的音乐我就没兴趣。
可以教他们唱你喜欢的音乐。
对啊，那倒是。
唱中文。
不过这边的 choir director 还需要弄 band， 我觉得那个好难哦。
要 band 哦。
其实我完全不知道谁现在在那边教的。
威利不没有教。
他走了。
抱歉。
要派出。快结婚。
哦，还有人教他。什么时候走了？好像几年前的。
去年我觉得。
好像最近的事啊。这样子。
Thank you, Yen. Thank you for the invitation. It's very intimate to be at someone's dinner table like that. Thank you to you and your family. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. And so for our last participant this evening, Samantha Joan Gonzalez. Samantha is an Arizona native. She was born in Tucson, Arizona, and grew up in Cochise, Arizona. The area she lived in was one that her family had a hand in for generations, a mix of Latino, Native American, Dutch, Swedish, and Scottish immigrants. Growing up in a small town with a population far less than 1,000 and in a school with a graduating class of 8, she developed a passion for education. Knowing that education was her calling from a young age, she sought to understand it and what the diverse population needed. Having found art to be a common language for students in a fluctuating time, she chose to focus on secondary art education, which she now studies at Western New Mexico University.
As a small child, I remember my grandmother, Patsy Joan Carper, speaking of people I've always heard of but never met. Her mother and father, her siblings, and her grandparents were distant relatives that were separated farther by time than by blood. They were a common topic. After all, she'd spent much of her life arranging documents of those relatives, as had her mother before her and many of their ancestors before them. She'd tell me of those that she was close to, and as a consequence, I developed a love for hearing about them and learning more, even if I didn't understand the significance. Those closest in time to me interested me the most, and only those who had written out their lives in detail could hold my attention for any span of time. The birth records, temple seals, newspaper clippings, Social Security records, and funeral programs often got overlooked in favor of paintings, photographs, drawings, and detailed written biographies. It wasn't until much later that anything further than those closest relatives started to mean anything to me. Eventually, the pictures that hung in tiny framed collections in the dining room were brighter than the greens and browns they'd faded into, and the typed life stories started to speak to me. It was last that I really understood the importance of the lists of names, dates, and places. It was in the words, not the photos, that I realized some of these people were closer to me than I could have imagined. Letty Mortensen, who spoke Dutch before English back in the 1800s, was raised primarily by her grandmother during her early childhood, just like I was. Andrew Mortensen, a nephew of hers, became a teacher, a profession I am pursuing. He also quilted, a skill many in my family also have, and one that I am not excluded from. The stories of these people in their lives, interests, and hardships are almost all set in familiar places. Tucson, Arizona, the city I was born in, was also the birthplace of Elizabeth Fay Thompson in 1959, Anthony Dale Sherman in 1966, and Rose Murray in 1980. Cochise, Arizona, where my great-grandparents bought my childhood home, is also the home of those who raised me, Patsy Carper and her daughter, Christine Carper. Wilcox, Arizona, where I lived as a teenager, was the birthplace of Sylvia Reynolds in 1956. Benson, Arizona, was the town where I went to high school, nearly an entire century after Norman Ray Thompson had lived there. Douglas, Arizona, where I first stumbled into college, was the birthplace of dozens of relatives, 47 in just the first handful of pages, starting from the earliest parts of my American family record, somewhere in the 1800s. My grandmother also was born there. Finally, I moved just recently to Silver City, entirely unknowing that Jesse Grant Swap had moved into the area with his wife and children in 1941, after his own ancestors had been in the area since the 1890s. Here, dozens of children would be born and buried in this city, recorded in the first half of the book in droves. Finally, dates became some of the most telling parts. February 1st, the day the siblings Zona Williams, Edith Almeda Williams, and Helen Maria Williams were born, 1913, 1920, and 1929, respectively. December 25th, the day Anna Sophia Eriksson, a Swedish girl who'd come across the Atlantic Ocean in a cargo hold of cattle at 14, married James Mortensen in 1866. And finally, December 2nd, the day I was born. 113 years before me, so was the woman who wrote the first entries in this book, Mary Amanda Mortensen, for her parents, grandparents, and some siblings. Next, Elmer Thompson shared the same birthday, 102 years before, in 1893. Marshall Earl Thompson, 51 years before, in 1948. And finally, Patsy Carper's eldest sister, Doris Leona Murray, who was born on December 2nd, 1930, buried the same day, 69 years before I came into this world. Some of these stories are full-fledged, complete with personal accounts of loved ones' adventures and hardships. Others are short, though almost all have their share of humor in them. Yet, overwhelmingly, others are only pure lists of names, dates, and places, leaving lost lineages, legacies, marriages, children, and deaths to the imagination. My mother's birth and marriage are written in my grandmother's handwriting, but my own records have never been added. My father's entire genealogy is left out. My last name, Gonzalez, is never mentioned. My grandmother's death is unrecorded, even as she lived to record her own siblings' passings. For its thorough care and detailed accounts, it's fragmented. As I read it now, becoming reacquainted with the stories that took place over the Oregon Trail in settlements that rose and fell without ever having a name to record, and of children who would never see their teenage years, I can't help but wonder what I don't see. Children like me who were intertwined with these records, but never had the opportunity to write their own stories. Adults who would have entire families that were never recorded. Or even those who did have a hand in this archive and the details that they chose to leave out. Thank you.
Well, Samantha, not only are you a part of this archive, but you are writing it. Please feel free to share your thoughts, in the chat with Samantha. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So we do still have one participant, but we're going to take this moment and we're going to share, we're going to launch the website. And it's perfect because we can use Abigail's story to all experience the website together. Let's try this. I'm going to try to see, let's see here. All right. There we go. All right. So this is the website. Thank you so much, Sebastiano Marino, who might be here with us. I hope he is. I can't see everyone because I'm sharing. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you also, Yen, who's also one of our participants, who's also done a lot in building this. Thank you so much to Alex Tager, who also did all these logistics and this together. And of course, Jennifer, and to all the participants. So this is the website. It's beautiful. Here is the archive that's in front at the top. You'll be able to access each of the stories. So let's go to Abigail. Friends, I'm sorry, I think it might actually be my internet as well. So this will be an occasion, we're trying all the other ways. This will be an occasion for you to revisit it and to make sure to hear Abigail's story directly from the website. So just as, so what this is, you will also have the participants and the organizers that you can kind of learn a little bit more. This, just please keep in mind that this workshop has been 1 week, but we've been organizing it for 3 months, and these are the things that take time, so the website is in progress. I would also like to introduce, you've already been introduced to them, but Dara, Yen, Sebastiano, and Jennifer will be continuing this, as I mentioned at the beginning of this evening, that if this is a living and evolving archive, and you're all invited, if you're from Silver City or have connections to it, to please submit your own photographs. We just ask that you use your own photographs, not borrowed ones, and your own recordings. And you can contact one of those 4 people. Their information is here in the contact. It will be. As I said, we're working on it still over this week. And so you can also be a part of this archive and keep sharing and hearing. So on that note, I wonder if the people who are here could please unmute themselves and please give a round of applause for all the brave and really beautiful stories that everybody shared, and all the time and labor and effort that people have brought to sharing these stories with you, and hopefully inspiring you to bring yours as well. So if you can just unmute yourselves so that we can celebrate them.
So I want to say something in this too, and you know, I'm just I was so amazed, Alia, when we first talked and you wanted to do this with us at WNMU, and I really, you know, it just, my heart, it just warms my heart that you've spent so much time doing this project, us working together for months before and now just the finished product, and seeing what happened to the students just in this short week time in the workshop. I mean, you and I talked about it a little bit, but I just want to relay that to everyone here, is is, you know, it was just phenomenal to see the growth in everybody, and as well as just really the connecting of ideas, you know, and thoughts, and how now they really understand, you know, how these images and their stories can become so powerful. And you were just brilliant. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored, and thank you all for trusting me. And I hope you'll come and visit me in Roswell. So please do. At the same time, the participants have also supported me as I was organizing and installing an exhibition, which will be open for the next 6 weeks. So please come up and contact me, and it would be nice to do a distance meet. And yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, enjoy the evening.
I want to let everybody know that Alia's talk is available. Her original talk workshop was still available on our WNMU Media YouTube channel. If you want to hear the beginning of this whole thing.
Thank you.
Good night.
And one other thing I do need to say is I really want to thank you, Alex, for everything with these projects. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.
You're pretty amazing.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Alia.
Congratulations. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Alia.
Thanks for everyone's support.